everybody, welcome back to Empire Fit Talk. Kita sekarang ada Coach Dean, Coach Elbert, dan saya Coach Gavi. Hari ini kita mau membahas tentang strength training sama running, right?
Yeah.
Right. Oke, jadi dari seputar topik itu kita akan bahas what is our experiences with it and then give you guys some tips also. Okay, so moving to our first question. Now, a lot of people here, they've already started training. They like to go to the gym, they look fit, they have a low body fat percentage, but does that mean that they are ready for a half marathon? Are they ready for a marathon? What do you guys think?
Okay, coming from me, I think it depends on the person, right? Because we might have someone with a average body fat percentage, but he's been training for half marathon already for like 3 months, 6 months, or even years. So being in shape that is determined by if they're already training in that particular specific sports or not, right? So if they're already training for that for long periods of time, I think they're already in shape. But so it depends on that.
Okay. What do you think, Coach?
Well, you're better off than somebody who's not been training, that's for sure. Tapi bukan berarti just because you can lift a certain weight or you have a low body fat percentage doesn't make it like, are you ready for marathon or half marathon, right? It takes different energy system. Your heart is definitely going to work a lot more versus you lifting weight, right, when you're doing a cardiovascular exercise. So you still need some sort of a good timing of conditioning, and work on your aerobic capacity before you jump into marathon or half marathon, right? And just like lifting weights, there's a proper technique to running, especially running at a long distance. So you better have to spend time to learn a proper way, just so that way you mitigate the risk of injury, the risk of hurting yourself. Okay, so you can finish the half marathon. I think that's the issue, right? Is whether you could sustain a certain speed for a long period of time. That's what it is when it comes to marathon or half marathon. So you still have to get your body conditioned to it, learn a proper technique and form for it. So don't just jump into it. I don't know. Some people did it and it worked out for them, but they could have been better, right? Then just because you heard a couple of people did it doesn't mean you should be following that also. Yeah.
All right, cool. Because I think some people, what I see, people start training in the gym and they have a goal of like doing a marathon or half marathon. But what they don't know is like training for a half marathon, like Coach Elbert said, and training for the gym is two different energy systems. Like you are using your muscles to basically lift heavy weights here, but then you need to condition your muscle to actually go for endurance.
Yeah.
You need to train your cardiovascular endurance. Now, for training, it comes down to progressive overload to get stronger and also to gain more muscle. But then in terms of running, you need to build that mileage week by week. And then if you don't have that aerobic base, that marathon, that half marathon mileage would be very, very hard for you to achieve. I mean, you guys can, but it's going to be a shit show. You guys might be walking and then running and then puking maybe, but you guys can finish.
Yeah.
But it might not be your best time.
Yeah. You miss out on the proper pacing, how you pace yourself and all of that. Yeah. It just won't be it could be a better experience with training. Yeah.
And injuries.
Injuries, yeah.
Because they're not able to pace themselves correctly.
That's right.
So in summary, for that first point, I mean, if you guys are lifting weights, you may not be race ready, right? But you are able to finish, but with very, very hard effort.
Yeah. I agree.
For the second point, now what sort of training should you do if you are getting ready for a half marathon or a full marathon? And should you combine strength training with running?
I would agree with combining strength training and running. I think twice a week is a sweet spot to actually like incorporate some leg training, like strength, lower body strength, and also some also upper body and core strength. So I think that's a really good combination, part of the cross training as well, we can actually say. So just try to just making sure that if you have a adequate lower body and upper body strength training for running, it will also minimize risk injury because you're also strengthening your joints, especially when you're running, because you'll be doing a repetitive movements for like 1,000 times or more, right? So it'll help you guys a lot with very beneficial for running, right? So in a sense as well, what sort of training that they can do aside from the strength training as well is probably like fartlek training, where they do like a 30 seconds like full on speed and then 30 seconds off speed, and they can do a sort of like a pyramid fartlek where they go from 30 seconds on and off, and they go for a 1 minute on and off, 2 minutes full on and off, they come down again to 1 minute and sort of. So that's one of the things that they can do. Interval training is also another part that they can actually do with distance wise, going on a full on and then off for a couple of distance and then they do it again. And also for sure long runs. I think long run here is one of the breaking points for them to sort of make it like a simulation base of their actual race or settings. But usually when they try to go to progress their long runs, they will go for a much lesser long run than what they're trying to go for. Let's say they going for a half marathon, probably 10K long run is what they're gonna try to pursue or achieve first, and then from there they're gonna build it up to 15, 12, 15, 18 until they can actually reach that half marathon base. Yeah, so I think that those are the types of training where it's differ towards the strength base and also the running itself.
All right, thanks, Coach Dean. How about you, Coach Elbert?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Coach Dean there. The type of training in terms of how often in a week could start off with 2 times per week, and then after that, as you get closer to the race, like a month or even 6 weeks before, you can increase volume. Okay, some people they increase volume a lot sooner. That's also fine as long as there's a proper plan to do it. Right now we're talking in the context of people who still wants to lift weights, right? Who still wants to train. So if you do like 3 days of running and on top of that you do 3 days or 4 days of lifting, I think that's still it's a lot. I think you need to start focusing more for the running aspect of things, especially if you're not an athlete, right? So first, I think on a weekly basis you start off with 2 and then you go to 3, and then I think 3 to 4 should be very good for you to have a proper to hit a proper time for your half marathon or marathon. Now in terms of training, this is my advice at first. I think if you have like 4 months out before the marathon or half marathon, first get your proper running technique. Okay, focus more a lot into a shorter distance, have some long distance just to kind of like get your body accustomed or introduced to it, but you could only really fix in terms of your pacing, your running form at a shorter interval at a fast pace, right? So for instance, like a 600 meter, 800 meter, 1K even pace, so that way you could hit it, and then combine that with your long runs, your shake up runs and all of that, so that's what I would do. Like say if I only train twice, I'll have 1 long run and 1 interval. Okay, now of course time to time you can have long or interval, but make sure there's a proper strategy to it. But that's what I would do. I'll focus on the short, long and short, and if I go 3 times, I'll go short and then long, or medium long, short, medium long, something like that. And then as we get closer to the half marathon, then maybe it's more of a, like a long, medium, or maybe short, long. But I'll definitely increase the frequency for the long runs that I would do. Okay.
All right. Super cool from you guys. Thank you for the insight. I think for this one, I do have some experience because I just finished a half marathon, and then I'm kind of in the category of I like to strength train, and then I kind of like want to start running. For me, the biggest challenge was managing the volume of the workout, because I still wanted to lift weights, like Coach Elbert said, and then I added running into it. I didn't taper a lot out of the strength training.
Yeah.
That is one big mistake that I did. I was still going a little bit too heavy for my leg days, and I was covering a lot more kilometers per week. So that caused hamstring strain, glute strain. That is something you don't want to do. So what sort of training should you do in terms of strength training for running is that you need to be specific for that sport. You need to have, if your goal right now is to run a half marathon, then you need to be specifically and periodizing your training for that that race. So most likely, some people have weak glutes, some people have weak hip flexors. So you guys need to attend to those weak muscles in order for you to actually complete that distance without any injuries.
Yeah.
But like Coach Elbert said, yeah, probably 4 months out is great for beginners. Start out slow, short mileages, kilometers, and then you guys can build up. For me, a good number to build up week per week is 10%. So let's say my longest run this week is like 10 kilometers, and I just add 10%, so 11 kilometers. So you're not overreaching. So that way, you are able to stay healthy for your training and then feel fresh before your half or marathon.
Yeah.
Oh, don't forget to taper.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I did that. I went from my highest kilometer was 15, and then 15 again, and then I didn't
Taper
down. So then during that 21, I was feeling okay, but after that 21K, my legs were donezo. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, just to note, there's so many approach to this, right? Maybe there's a specific running coach that have different strategy. Now, at the beginner level, I think as long as you're not stupid with the way you approach the training, you'll see a significant, or not a significant, but you see a good progress as long as you put some time into the running, right? We're talking in the context of somebody who likes to lift and then wants to add in more runs to it, right? I bet you if you talk to a pure running coach that train with athlete who, with nothing else in mind except running, perhaps their approach will be different, right? It won't be as what we just recommend. This is putting into consideration of somebody who likes to lift, so likes to work out with us, and then how would they approach training without neglecting what they actually like to do. Okay. Cool. Oh, just to add also, probably would add a little bit of, in terms of strength training, obviously you need to still lift weights. I would also do like things that will work you laterally, because in terms of running, right, you're only moving at one direction, right? It's just going to the front, so you tend to overtrain on that muscle that you use, right? Only one plane of motion. So I think adding a little lateral movement, strength movement will also help out strengthening the other muscle, so that way it's not being neglected, because those are the muscle that will get weak and then just eventually will hinder you from your progress.
All right, thanks guys. So third point, when do you think you are ready for a half marathon or a marathon?
Okay, for this question, I think the answer would be how our aerobic capacity is ready already. So if our cardiovascular capacity and fitness is actually good enough for that particular distance, I think that's one of the indicators that we are actually ready for the event. And secondly is how our running technique is. If our running technique is already on point, we already know that what we need to actually improve, maybe the hand drive, maybe the strides, maybe how we land, because there's different types of, there's forefoot landing, midfoot, and those kind of heel strike and stuff like that we actually need to address. And yeah, just basically if the running technique and the aerobic capacity is great, I think it's already ready for someone to actually do the half marathon or full marathon.
All right, what do you think, Coach Elbert?
Yeah, I think for me, I think if you could sustain running at a certain pace for, say for instance, your aim in that 21K is about 2 hours and 30 minutes, and if you could sustain that 4 weeks, 5 weeks out before the actual race, then I think that's pretty solid. You don't want to find out can you do it on the race day, right? Because then that's too late when you find out, and then there's so many emotion that goes into the race day. You could have thrown out your pace, right? Especially as a beginner. So I think 4 weeks out, 5 weeks out, if you're running half marathon, can you stay, at a certain pace for 2 hours or so? I think that's a pretty good indicator that you're ready for it. But if you have to take a break every 30 minutes, if you have to take a break, no matter how slow you go, no matter how slow you go, if you have to take a walk for about an hour, it doesn't mean that you can't run a half marathon. It's just that, you're just not ready for it. You're not as conditioned as you think you are. The goal here is to not stop in terms of running it, right? Not to walk, right? So make sure you're still able to jog, even a slow jog, for a certain amount of time. Yeah.
All right. I like both of your opinions. I'm more of a numerical kind of person. So I know, so let's say running a half marathon, it's 21.1. I feel like I know I'm ready to run a 21.1 if my longest run is around 15, 16 kilometers. So in my head, well, I just need to push for another 5K. Now that's my experience. During the race at the 16K was okay, but pushing that last 5K was hard, but it was doable. Because in your head, it's like, it's only another 5K. I think when I knew I was ready, when I was able to run 15K without stopping.
Yeah.
So that your body's already conditioned. 15K was an hour, 40 something minutes. You just add another 30 minutes, you're able to complete that half marathon. So that's from what I think. Now we segue a little bit into the nutrition. Eating for strength training and to gain muscle is very different than eating to fuel for half marathon. Now, what kind of food do you think people need to be eating? How does it differ?
I mean, protein for sure. We still need protein for our fuel because we're also still using the muscle. We're contracting the muscle, but now it's a different fiber types that's actually fired up instead of the type 2 or the type 2B or something like that. It's more of the type 1, which is the oxidative or more so of the carbohydrate fuel as the main fuel, right? So that's why we hear a lot of people saying like carb loading. So basically carbs or carbohydrates is going to be the main fuel. So like breads, like whole wheat, wholemeal breads, croissant, those kind of stuff are basically our main fuel. But again, the selection of the carbs is also matters a lot, where we want it to have the most dense and the most efficient of the fibers and also carbohydrates that's actually more beneficial for the running, right? And also from there we can see that the hydration is also very important. Because what I felt when I ran and I'm not drinking enough, I drink too much coffee, I overheat. Like I can feel that my muscle is actually overheating in the heat. I'm not sure in comparison to when I actually hydrate myself well. So I can like sustain longer without overheating the calves and the quads and the glutes. But when I'm not hydrating enough, when I'm dehydrated too, like caffeine and coffees, it's just not efficient when I'm running. Like I felt like after 7K, 8K, my body's just overheating and I just want to stop. And my heart rate shot up all of a sudden. I mean, that's like my personal experience when I'm hydrated well and when I'm not hydrated well.
Of course. That plays a lot when you're running.
Yeah, because we sweat a lot when we're running, and then we just need to make sure that we exchange that sweat that's out, right. into proper hydration. So water in, water out.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're going to be drinking in the middle of the run also, right? You can't be eating in the middle of the run. So the water, hydration is really important. But in terms of fuel, obviously the carbs and fat as well. You guys going to be using a lot of those for a more long-lasting kind of fuel, right? Still have your protein, but instead of building the muscle, the idea is like, how can I have a sustainable fuel, right? Perhaps when you're lifting, you're like, okay, I'm eating a lot for recovery so that way I could build this muscle. But during that training, you're definitely need to eat something that will last throughout that an hour and a half to 2 hour of training, right? So I think the approaches have to be a little bit different in terms of the food consumption. You might see a little bit spike up in carbs, because that's what you want to use, right, for the training, so on. So yeah, make sure you eat properly. That's not, what we don't want people to do is because they're running and then they eat less as well, right? Then you're just asking for an injury, or you're just not gonna progress. Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely from you guys, carbs are very important for long runs, right? For marathon, half marathon trainings. Because what I see, in a lot of people, they don't really fuel for their runs,
Yeah.
and they will, like, it will be very, very hard for them to complete. Like, their energy is just depleted on the 8K or 10th kilometer because they haven't been um, fueling enough glucose in their bloodstream. Now, for me, eating during the race is a little hard. But I wasn't conditioned to use those carb gels yet because those carb gels are easy to consume. It's like 30 grams of carbs and then it just goes down the bloodstream. But what I did was I took cereal bars. Yeah, not the best idea, but it gave me carbs. Like, it gave me carbs, and at least you need to be eating 45 minutes during that race because a half marathon, it took me 2 hours and 30 minutes. If you're not fueling during that time, you're going to hit a wall in that 12 kilometer or 15 kilometer. Now, you were saying about cramping and hydration, right?
Yep.
On top of just drinking water, some people, if they don't have enough food in them, they don't have enough salt in their body. Because you're sweating a lot, it's all about balance. If you don't have enough salt in your body, it's going to cause cramps.
Yeah.
So some people have salt sticks when they're running. So basically, the summary for this is when you're strength training, a lot of protein. Running also, you have to have some protein, but probably not as much because we want to make sure that most of the fuel are coming from carbs or some of the fat. All right, next point. So what if you are not in shape right now? What should you do to be ready for a half marathon?
This question, I think, will also relate to a lot of people out there as well that's wanting to do marathons and wanting to try to get out of their comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be try to go to the foundation of your body first. So try to build up strength first, especially in that lower extremity. And the upper extremity, have a balanced core as well for the stability of the body. Once you already hit that, while doing that, do some extra stuff, maybe some walking, some just stationary bikes first. Try to get that weight down until it's very, very like already okay for the body to feel like, okay, now I think I'm gonna start trying to pace myself with some small joggings and stuff, while incorporating some strength training along the
Yeah.
way. Because now when they're already consistent with the strength training, it's a lot easier to actually try to go and build up towards that goal afterwards. And they already have a great foundation and base for their body as well to actually start and continue to their next fitness journey.
Yeah. For me, I think it depends on how out of shape you are and how long did you give yourself to get ready for a marathon. Right? If you're really, really out of shape and you only have 1 month to go, dude, you could do half marathon, but it's gonna take you probably 4 hours for a half marathon because you're gonna be walking mostly. And you're also gonna do half a marathon for like 6 hours, maybe 7 hours. I don't know, but either way, I mean, you could still do it because you just have to cover a long distance of grounds. Just how fast do you want to do it, right? But ideally, if you're really, really out of shape, uh, you know, you want to build that base. Give yourself at least, I would say, 6 to 8 months would be a pretty good safe bet where you could have a decent time without majority of it being a walk. You're still gonna have to walk some of it, right? And if you do it for a year, then perhaps you could not have to walk on some of it, right? Starting off, if your goal in mind is a marathon or running, half a marathon or a marathon, you still have to have your strength training, but your cardio needs to be trained right away. Yeah, would say majority of it, right? First, obviously, taper down some weight, so that way it's not too much impact on your joints. But you could get that via running. I mean, via low impact cardio, for instance, biking, swimming. All right. So instead of right away you're trying to run, if you're really out of shape, go on the bike, go on the ski rower, or go on swimming, something that is low impact, so that way it'll save your joint from injury later. And once you lost a certain amount of weight or a certain percentage of fat, then you could introduce running little by little. Say I only have 6 months to somebody who are say at 25% body fat, who's a guy, okay, at 30 years of age. That's what I would do. I would like 2 days will be a very cardio based, low impact, some carries also, and the other 1 or 2 days will definitely have some strength training and some hit involved. And then after that, as that person lose more weight, then I'll go into more of a cardio based training. Because at this point, if our focus is to get into a marathon, although having more muscle is good, although having more muscle is best, that shouldn't be the priority in mind, I think. And that person probably will lose a lot of weight, both fat and muscle, especially if we get ready for that, right? Obviously, for people who's already in shape, we don't want them to lose too many of the muscles, so they still have to train that strength training. But somebody who's like, I'm out of shape, I just want to do a marathon, then you would, or go into a cardio heavy based training. The strength training more so you don't get injured, right? We've got to build some strength to it, but that won't be the priority for sure. Yeah.
All right. I like both of you guys' answers because, again, if you're not in shape, Coach Elbert was saying, if you're someone who's overweight, you don't want to be putting stress on the joints.
Yeah.
And that kind of highlights how important it is to develop some strength training as well, like sprinkle in some strength training with your marathon or half marathon prep, because that way you're minimizing the injuries you're going to get, and then you make sure your joints are healthy, your muscles can actually endure the impact that you're going to put it through during the race. So now this actually kind of segues to our next question, because how important is it to strength train while you're preparing for a race? What do you guys think?
Well, it's very important. Again, like we already said, how it affects our performance later on and how it limits us from injury risk as well, right? Besides it's decreasing it. They're also very good to focus on unilateral movements, especially in our lower extremities, because as we see, running is part of the gait cycle as well. So there's a lot of like stepping, going frontal, right? So again, like what Coach Elbert mentioned before, the lateral stuff is also very important because we tend to neglect that aspect.
Yeah.
So with addressing unilateral movements, going sideways, laterally, frontal, and yeah, just simple stuff like even though that if you're doing both legs on the ground too, like hip thrust and stuff like that, that will also benefit you. Especially the glutes are one of the main gait cycle contributors in making our, stabilizing our hip and our joints, especially when we're moving. So I think it's very important in that sense.
Good. Yeah. For injury mitigation, of course, you gotta do strength training. You have to have strength training in place. Again, not for a point to build muscle, just so that way you look good, but for performance, you have to have it. Not just for your muscle, but for your tendons as well. So can't give that up. Whether you're a long distance runner or you're a sprinter, you need to have some sort of training in place. How much? Now again, you don't have to look into like trying to hip thrust double your body weight or triple your body weight or squatting double your body weight, but you have to have a good amount of load so that way your bodies are also introduced and become accustomed or uh, become adaptive to a certain load, so that way in case things happen, in case something unpredictable happen, your body could handle the pressure, so strength training definitely important. Yeah.
From my side, strength training specifically for running, it is very, very beneficial because for me, I didn't know that my glutes were not supporting. Like when I was running, my lower back it took over because my glutes were not doing what it was supposed to do. So you don't have to be doing heavy, heavy work, but
Yeah.
make sure you are training your glutes with some weights, like some single leg hip thrusts, with some simple squats, hip flexors as well. If your hip flexors are weak, it will tend to hurt as well when you're running too much because you're overusing it as well. You want it to be strong. What else for me? Oh, ankle. My calves are. Now I understand having strong calves is very, very important when you run because it's it was almost one of my limiting factors because it's always gonna get tight and weak during the longer run. So if you're able to add a little bit of strength training and then you're able to have it consistently, it's less frequent that your running form will break down.
Mm.
So that's from my side. That is probably one of the things that I would like to implement in 2 months. We're running 2 months, right?
2 months,
guys.
Sure.
2 months. In 2 months.
So out of shape. Been
This is
sick.
great
I've been
podcast.
hurt. Yeah. So
So 2 months.
Actually, I have a
Um,
question, Gaby.
mhm.
So let's say you have been neglecting your calves, right?
Yeah.
So in a lower body workout, so you don't like doing calves, right?
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So you like throughout the weekend, I actually read a powerlifting book, and
Okay.
they actually say in part of the strength training, what you don't like is what you actually need.
yeah.
So
Thanks, Coach Dean.
so yeah, so just don't neglect that, everyone.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to do the things that you don't like to do. Basically, that's what you need to do. Anything you guys want to add or some tips for those who have race coming up? What do you want them to do?
Well, just get prepared, plan your meals, plan your recovery. Don't forget to taper yourself throughout the D-day of the event. Like us in 2 months, so we already should know, like probably coming towards that 4 weeks out. We already know how to taper it, especially when we have to travel later on, because still it's gonna be outside the city, and yeah, just making sure that you also have a great support system as well, because that will matter a lot. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just get prepared. As long as you already train for it with the miles, with the strength training, you should be good to go.
All right. What about you, Coach Elbert?
Yeah.
Tips?
Have a plan. If you don't know what you're doing, get a coach. Don't just because I'm running in the half marathon. I'm just gonna start running in Gebeka without actually proper planning into it. So follow a program. I think that's gonna help. There's plenty of program out there. You could even ask ChatGPT for a program now.
Discovering
So
Chat.
there's all kind of ways. Just have a proper planning. Okay, have a proper kind of like target in place, realistic target. And lastly, don't forget to have fun. I think people get too caught up into this competition or this half marathon, and get so scared about it. They start training. Their life is like revolve around that. They start neglecting everything else. Have fun. Um, Having a community definitely help. Running together. You want to be crossing the finish line with somebody there waiting for you. I think that's gonna be very very rewarding feeling. And if you're not an athlete, look, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Okay, just approach it properly. Approach it where you're gonna be satisfied with the time, and that's it. Just have fun. Yeah.
All right. From my side, I think the more you educate yourself about what you're going into, the
Mhm.
better prepared you're going to be. Because for me, I want to do a half marathon because I want to experience what I have to go through. I want to learn what is half marathon training about. So if you can approach it in an education mindset, like you want to learn, you'll be able to plan better. But then if, like, let's say you don't want to think about it, then please get a coach, because you don't just want to run blindly. That's just dumb. So either get a coach or educate yourself, so then you know what is going through your body, and you know how to actually plan better week by week leading up to that race. Now, secondly, also, this is one thing that I wish I did for my first race, was to try out my fueling. Like for my long runs, I wish I would have tried out like a gel. I wish I would have tried out, what would my body feel like if I had some salt sticks? So you want to make sure that you are testing those out before you're running. Otherwise, you don't want to put new things in your body and then you don't know how you react. Maybe you have a stomach ache, or maybe you get cramps. So that's my tip for you guys who have running race coming up. Any other things you guys want to add before we conclude this Empire Fit Talk?
I think I'm all good already.
You're all good?
Yeah, I think
All
that
good?
we're good. Yeah.
All right, can we tell them what we're doing in the 2
Sure.
months?
Yeah.
All right, so basically, ladies and gents that are watching this podcast, we'll be running the half marathon, Maybank half marathon. So if you guys are there, catch us there. We're competitive, so I'm making sure that I finish faster than.
I'm not competitive at all when it comes to my half marathon. I don't care. You guys are gonna pass me.
Finishing more than who?
Faster than you.
But you'll definitely hear me talk shit about it if I finish faster.
But that is all, guys. Thanks for watching this Empire Fit Talk. We'll see you guys in another episode. Please subscribe, like, and let us know what kind of topics you guys wanted us to talk about. See you guys.
Peace.
See you.
Thanks, guys.